Well, I mean, we can record it on Zoom anyway, if
Oh,
you
wait.
like.
Here it says
This
the
was already
content
a
of this.
good.
I get now the content of this meeting is being sent to a third party on YouTube.
Yes, this is Zoom. You're talking about Zoom, right?
Yes, on Zoom. It's now I get the notification that you are now live streaming on YouTube as well.
Ah, good question. Is there a I mean, pause button?
Or does it say the content of this meeting is being sent to YouTube? Maybe it's not live streamed.
No, it's not live. I mean, it's. I don't think
Oh
it's
yeah, it
live
is.
yet.
I see myself on
It's
YouTube.
happening.
I do see ourselves. Brother.
I don't see myself. Yes, yet. Yes. Do you see me on YouTube?
Yeah, I saw you. Yeah, on YouTube. If you click on the link in Zoom, why?
All right, restart.
Yeah. Welcome to Breathe with Me, where I organize everyday live meditations. Today we have a special guest, my dear friend, world-renowned mystic Sujit Ravindran, world famous for his bestseller books like The Shiva Code, The Being Leader, and many others. Now, Sujit, it is my pleasure and happiness to have you in this space and to go into the conversation of the new man, a concept that you introduced to the world to see what you want to do with this new concept of the new man. We have this conversation and we dive into the question, what does it mean to be a man? You're also very famous for going with men into nature and having walks, whether it's in Italy or India or any other place in the world. Many, many, many men love to join you in those walks to work on themselves, to rethink the context of their lives and to yeah, be in your presence and learn about themselves. I had the privilege to join two of those walks that were life changing and very, very beautiful for myself. And I also joined you as a director for the 8 episode docu-series that will be on the streamers called The 13th Man. Now we also co-creating a 52 minutes documentary called The New Man. And that's what we are going to talk today about, the concept of the new man. So Sujit, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Sujit, when we talk about the new man and we want to dive into what this actually means, I first would like to ask you, you are for many men very famous if it comes to man's work. What has it been in your own life that you've always been attracted to actually be a teacher when it comes to man's work?
Mm, mm. Thank you. Thank you, Koen, for being such a great friend, for being a fellow traveler in life. And now, these conversations, yes, indeed, the documentaries that we are making, are going to be very instrumental in deepening this conversation about what does it mean to be a man today. So thank you for your leadership on that one. To your question, leadership, men, the fundamental thing, Koen, is, my own practice to be a better version of myself. That is the most predominant guiding force for me behind my leadership. Is not outward oriented, like, oh, you know what, here are a couple of million men and they're around me, they seem to be following me, they are exploring what it is mean to be a man. All of that is nice, okay. However, the important anchor for me in that leadership is my own practice to be the best version of myself that I can be as a social citizen, as a parent, as a partner, as a friend. How can I be a better person? Also, simply for my own inner peace, for my joy, for my happiness. And that is, for me, the greatest driving force that also underpins my leadership.
That's beautiful what you share. I know you already for countless of years, like almost 15 years. And what I know
Uh-huh.
about you is that you've been not only a teacher for everyday men, but also for leaders around the world, whether it's the European Union or the European Commission or the United Nations or any other political field you are asked to lead and help people and actually to be, as you say, a space holder. Now,
Mm,
if it comes to men, I would like to focus on everyday men like
mm,
myself.
mm,
Um, why it is needed that men sometimes go into the wild and into nature, because that is a big part of your practice.
mm, mm. That is fundamentally essential, Kuhn, leaving our habitat. If you look at the centuries old tradition from which I come, but also you look at the very, very old, the indigenous, the ancient traditions of all lands, you notice that going into wilderness, Kuhn, is fundamental to men's work. And this is not some romantic notion, let's pack up all our things, go into the woods, and have a good time with other men. No, it is very logical. That is, if we want to continue to reinvent ourselves, whether it is you as an everyday man, or me, any of our friends or leaders, whoever it is, you know in order for us to become a new version of the self, we need to disrupt the old self, our habits, our conditioning, our mechanical autopilot selves, the selves that we have inherited from our fathers through the social conditioning, through media, through other role models, peer to peer connections. We are the product of all that conditioning, all those habits. And in no other place are these habits, these conditionings most pronounced than in our habitat. The moment, I can tell you this little example, like, the home where I grew up in India is a home where my mother still lives, and she's 80 years old. And I grew up as a kid in that home. And it doesn't matter who I've become today, how many people I guide or lead or hold space for, or all these governance and political bodies where I support, the media and television, etc., that I show up, some of these bestseller books, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to her the moment we walk into her home. Automatically, she returns to that caregiver Doesn't matter she's 80 years old. It doesn't matter that I'm 52 years old. She returns immediately to that caregiver role. That's it. She treats me like a child. The reason why I'm sharing this is because that's the nature of our conditioning. In our habitat, we return to our habits. So, back to your question, that if you want to become a new version of yourself, you have to deconstruct your habits. You have to step out of your conditioned orbits. And that means you have to step out of your habitat. And great, you step out of your habitat, you go into wilderness. Wilderness is magical, not from a romantic perspective. But imagine this. You would go into the energy of the earth. You step into that land, into that nature, bare feet. And suddenly you're one with nature. Your inner nature and the outer nature becomes one. You immerse into that vibration, that beautiful, peaceful, joyful, Zen vibration of nature. And there is a profound shift that happens when you return to that being beyond all your habits and your conditioning, etc. That is the power of leaving your habitat and entering wilderness, especially for men's work.
Yes. Now, you had also yourself a whole life. You've been born in India, but you also lived in Canada, in Italy, and you traveled all over the world. Now, my question for you is, how was it for yourself to find out what it means to be a man? Because something happened within your life that you realized, you know what, I want to be there for other men. So, what was this shift in your own life?
Koen, by the way, don't forget to mention, I also lived in the Netherlands. Your beautiful land from which you come. Yes, 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 yes. I lived in the Netherlands too, and lots and lots of fond memories, lots and lots of great, great friends, a very, very huge following in the Netherlands for men's work, the work that I do on myself and with others. Um, to your specific question, of course, there's been many cycles where I have actually had deep, deep reflections each moment about who am I and what does it mean to be a man myself. But I can actually draw a straight line to the time when I was in my late teens. And that was a time when, I was pretty much being autonomous, self authored to some extent. And I realized how difficult it was for me to be in healthy, respectful, functional relationships. With myself, yes, the challenge I had was enormous. With the women in my life, yes, the challenges I had. With the friends I had around, with society around me, in my professional setting, the authenticity, the genuineness with which I can show up. I had great challenges there. And yes, it was very convenient to listen to other people, elders around me in India. It's very convenient to speak with my friends and peers about it. It was convenient to read books at the time. Internet wasn't there. And all these new age gurus were in there. But I had the timeless, ancient masters around me. But it was not instantly that I went to them. Like pretty much any arrogant teenager, I'm kind of like, hey, you know what? Firstly, I had no problems. The problem was with the rest of the world. And after a while, recognizing, there has to be some problem with me, I was kind of like, you know what? Hey, I think I could fix myself. I could myself figure it out and fix it. And then only step three was one where, okay, I want to return to the timeless wisdom. And it was in that inquiry process that I came to realize that, with all the love I have for my dad, he was somebody who struggled with his own mature masculinity. He struggled with it. And I grew up 15 years of life before my dad passed away, um, being in the energy field, in the shadow of that very immature, adolescent kind of masculine that he lived by. And those were some of all his sacrifices and his conditioning and his scarcity and not having his teachers in his life and all of that. And I was, as a young adult, pretty much living those dysfunctions. And that's where I really came to realize through my teachers, you know what? I need to depart from that immature self, discover deep within that sacred, that divine, that mature masculine self. So, definitely, late teens was a very, very profound moment where everything was going wrong, where eventually I was very, very fortunate that the divine would bring me to a place where I could look at myself.
Yeah, that's how I know you, that you always think about setups when other people think about upsets. And that is showing your character, that you always, wherever you are in life, whether it's raining or storming, you always see the blessing in that moment. And that is makes you, for me, a very special friend, because if I look around me, many people they struggle sometimes with seeing the beauty in life, in the abundance, of which you actually have written also a beautiful book, The 7 Laws of Abundance. And in that way, actually, I could say that that I also understand why so many men, countless of men, are drawn to your practice. Now, let's focus on one of the practices that you do, and that is organizing the walks. So if we focus on the walk, and that means that you go for 8 days, for instance, in India, around Narmada River, for 8 days, walking with guys, sometimes even barefooted, sometimes in noble silence, sometimes standing in a circle. But what is the power of organizing this walk? What is the spiritual wisdom behind going into a walk?
Mm, mm. Um, I lost you there for a few seconds, so
Okay,
not sure if.
I will repeat my question. Yeah.
Right.
Now you invite guys all over the world to join you in these sacred walks. So what is the spiritual wisdom behind going into a walk and actually do the walk, do the actual practice of walking quite big distances?
It's a great question, Koen. Look at it. From the time we were living, humanity was living in tribes, in clans, the art of pilgrimage used to exist. It is the most profound, the most timeless practice available to men to reconnect with their divine essence. So much so, I have to say, I very categorically insist with all the leaders around me, all the men around me that I know, I insist that you must definitely do your pilgrimages. To the extent, I insist that every man must do at least one pilgrimage a year. It is that powerful I think you know this much better than most other people because you've done your share of pilgrimages. I know for myself, like categorically, I can say this is the most powerful practice for men to reconnect with their divine, mature essence. Now, yes, there is something extremely profound about it, like earlier that I mentioned to you. It's about departing from our habitat, departing from our habits to step into the unknown, to surrender into the universal wisdom, the wisdom of nature, the reconnection, the profound, profound reconnection that you experience through the practice of noble silence. Now, all the indigenous traditions, Koen, there's an acknowledgement of 5, 8, 10 stages that we go through in an initiation process. And these stages, they kind of can be categorized under departure that you do, a departure from the old self, a passaging, one where we surrender into the cosmic wisdom, the divine wisdom of nature, about the inner nature, all of that, the vision quest that we undertake, the passaging part. And then the arrival, one where we return with the blessings of self-realization, self-awareness. What does it mean to be a man? The integrity that is inherent within the mature masculine, or that higher purpose that transcends survival or self-preservation, that is very innate to an awakened man, or the self-authorship or the inner authority, the one where we recognize that we are the architects of our own life. Those blessings, those self-realizations, those self-awareness, those booms with which we return to our life, that is what the magic of the pilgrimage contains. If it is done in the spirit of pilgrimage, not just as some aerobic activity or recreational activity.
Yes, I recognize what you share. A big part of this is also to go out of your comfort zone, right? Because especially men in the northern part of the world, they enjoy a lot of comfort, a lot of pleasure. And you actually say, well, let's go out of your comfort zone and actually see the blessing in this. So if you focus on that, why it's important that we sometimes stand up from our couch, switch off Netflix, and go beyond what we know of our everyday life.
Wow. Uh, to answer that question, Koen, I would have to take you into indigeneity. That is where the answer is. In my tradition, we have a simple recognition that deep inside us, each one of us, every human being is contained the inner feminine and the inner masculine. The part of the body where the organ of the heart is, that is the inner feminine. That's the half of the inner feminine, while the right side is the half of the inner masculine. Now, the beauty of the inner feminine and inner masculine is special in very, very unique and different ways. That the more and more we, as men or women, or those who identify with any other gender for that reason, who am I to judge? The more and more we enter the cocoon, the comfort of our homes, the beauty of our couch, the certainty of life, everything that is architected to great harmony and material peace. When we live in a life in the cocoon like that, it creates the conditions for the inner feminine to activate. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm not disputing that. That inner feminine has got beautiful wisdom to give us that guides us through life, whether it's compassion, whether it's understanding, whether it's love, whether it's patience, whether it's forgiveness, that inner feminine has so much to offer. However, what it's done to many, many, many men who live in the global north of the planet is that cocooning has disconnected them from their inner masculine, the Shiva force that we recognize in my wisdom, in my indigenous wisdom from India. We recognize the consciousness of Shiva as the consciousness of the divine masculine, the mature masculine. We get disconnected from the wisdom of the mature masculine, the Shiva energy, the more and more we remain in that cocoon. While on the other hand, Koen, when you and I, we would just get out of that couch, that life of certainty and comfort, we get out of that and we step out into the unknown, into the uncertain, into the discomfort, beyond the limits of our comfort, into wilderness. There is something profoundly magical that happens to us. And that is, we suddenly start accessing that Shiva force. And most of us, of course, we don't know about the Shiva or the Shakti, etc. What we know as men when we go into that wilderness is suddenly there is this incredible sense of homeness that happens to us, a sense of quiet, tranquil knowing of the self, this incredible, inexplicable inner peace that happens to us. And there also is a very different kind of clarity that is related to that inner knowing, a very different kind of clarity compared to the kind of clarity we have when we are in our cocoons. That clarity is actually the wisdom of Shiva, of the mature masculine, that is starting to express itself now that we are outside the cocoon. Because that Shiva energy activates. It activates only when we are beyond that cocoon, beyond the known, the comforts, the certainty. And the moment we connect with that force, we are now in union with Shiva, with the mature masculine. That is the power of stepping outside the cocoon.
Yeah, and to understand it a little bit better, you speak about the inner feminine and the inner masculine. This has not much to do with your gender, or does it? Can you explain a bit the difference between gender and the inner forces? Because if I hear you speak with so much passion and beauty about the inner masculine, it's not to replace the inner feminine. It's more like to balance those powers within yourself, right?
Important here, I'm not really qualified, Koen, to speak about genders and sex. These are, verbiage that's associated with the English language. And, I'm not from that land where I feel native about the distinctions between gender, sex, etc. So let me approach this inquiry through the lens of my civilizational wisdom. That, when we look at the makeup of our physical bodies, the physical bodies, we can call, oh, there's a male body, there's a female body, there is this transgender body, etc. What is fundamental, foundational to recognize beyond the bodies is every human body holds within us both the feminine consciousness and the masculine consciousness, the feminine awareness or the feminine energy and the masculine energy. Those who, at least to the extent I can interpret the terminology, those who we refer to as heterosexual men are men who are anchored in their inner masculine. Heterosexual women are anchored in their inner feminine. A homosexual man or a homosexual woman, it can vary. Some of them are anchored in the other energies. All of that is perfect. Everything that exists in nature is perfect. Whatever the composition of the inner feminine and inner masculine energies. Now, most people around me are heterosexual. I have a number of homosexual friends too. And I do know a number of transgender people too. What is important to pay attention to is not the configuration of the body. Let me repeat that part again. The moment we focus on the configuration of the body, we've got it wrong. We're going to be in the most confusing, ambiguous relationship with the person. What is important to focus on is the orientation of the energies inside the person. And there, for the mature masculine, is again, we can deconstruct it if you like, if you want to go deeper in there. But let me just put one statement in there. The mature masculine is one who is, and I've written about this extensively in the book, The Shiva Code. A mature masculine is a man who is very powerfully anchored in the inner masculine while having activated the inner feminine. At the extent of sounding provocative, and I want to be candid, a mature masculine is not a man who has balanced the inner masculine and inner feminine energies as you so predominantly, popularly hear in the New Age movement these days. There is a stage of our lives when we are transcending our worldly existence to the otherworldly existence, to the spiritual existence, where that kind of balancing is important. That's contextual. Otherwise, that isn't the balancing of the inner feminine and masculine is not the journey of our worldly operations. It is one where, as a mature masculine, I'm grounded in my inner masculine while having activated my inner feminine. And the same applies for the mature feminine. The mature feminine is one, she is grounded, anchored in her inner feminine while having activated that inner masculine, because it's in that activation that rough diamond gets polished into this precious being that we become. I'll stop there and check in with you.
Yeah, no, I was taking a stand for the inner feminine because sometimes you see that when men are new in this path of what you call the tantric wisdom of inner masculine and inner feminine, that they embody so much the inner masculine that they start to forget about the inner feminine, or vice versa. So what I would, maybe I understand that you say it's not a complete balance as a yin and yang, because you say as a heterosexual man, it's very important that you that the place from which you operate is the inner masculine. But let us not forget the inner feminine that also has that qualities to, as you say, polish the diamond. So I understand you now even better. And but there's a problem there for you as a teacher, and that is that we in the West, we think of A to B, and in the East, often people think more in a holistic perspective. When you say when you have to be grounded in the inner masculine, the idea of domination pops up in my mind, which is maybe the conditioning that I have, because I do not want to dominate the inner feminine or something like that. I would just, but maybe that is because of my tradition of how I look at life, that that at the moment something is stronger than the other, that you feel like, oh, there is already some dominating force. Do you understand my train
Yes.
of thought here? Yes.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because I'm sure that this would be of great interest to many of our listeners. It is to countless men and women around me. It is of interest. So I'm glad that you brought it up, Koen. Yes, we are, as humanity, recovering from decades, if not centuries, of uh, the expression of the juvenile masculine and the juvenile feminine. I look at the way our institutions are today, the mischief that is happening in Europe and, of course, across the Atlantic too, and the global South, without excluding those parts. You can see the dance of the juvenile masculine and of the juvenile feminine is very, very much on display. And it's very easy to allow ourselves to be triggered by all of that and then get into a conversation, as a recoil from those generational traumas to eventually end up adopting the wrong prescription. To your point, of course, you think in terms of patriarchy or dominance, etc., of the juvenile masculine, or you look at the manipulation and sexual seduction, sexuality as power, etc., the lies through which we, Machiavellian ways through which we control, that's the toxic feminine. Now, all of that connects very deeply to the pilgrimage you were talking about earlier, the initiation. What is that initiation, Koen? That initiation is just this: me as a teenage masculine. In my teenage masculine, doesn't matter whether I'm in a body that is 80 years old or 52 years old or 30 years old. We are not initiated anymore. We can argue the same about the feminine too, women too. The idea of initiation is exactly that. For a man, heterosexual man, the idea of initiation is the idea of going on that pilgrimage, in my case, and activating the inner feminine. That is at the core of initiation. Like, there are centuries old, beautiful, timeless traditions of initiation for women who are in their teen feminine. And they go into this very profound initiation. At the core of those initiation processes for them is the activation of the inner masculine. Because that inner masculine brings a certain refinement, a certain polishing of that feminine. That feminine, from being raw feminine, suddenly starts becoming a very subtle, sensual, contained feminine nature. Of course, that doesn't exclude the playful, wild, adventurous feminine. No, but it is the activation of that masculine that turns the uncut diamond into the polished diamond. That is the power of initiation. And when I am an initiated man, I have activated my inner feminine. Yes, I do show up being very much at home in my inner masculine with all the masculine related attributes. However, I also have a very natural capacity for compassion, understanding, patience, etc. The attributes associated with the goddess.
Now, many men join your walk completely oblivious about what you just shared. They have no idea this tantric wisdom. They just feel somewhere deep down in their heart they want to become a better man. And there are many traditions that is maybe not your tradition that go straight away to enlightenment or awakening and never mention the masculine or the feminine. So in which way is your tradition unique in that sense? And is it really a must to understand this to make a step further as a human being? Or is it just a way of interpreting our reality?
Yeah, there are several nuances, layers to your inquiry here, Koen. And let me see if I can unpack a little bit of the layers. Firstly, I love what you shared. Around the wisdom traditions, and it's not just in my wisdom tradition from the civilizational India, um, but also in many other wisdom traditions that I've been fortunate to practice. I've noticed, the very, very powerful holistic wisdom of the masculine and the feminine exists. Yes, in the civilizational wisdom in India, the the idea, the truth of the masculine and feminine is extremely well expressed, well portrayed. That is an advantage, without doubt. Now, our journey as a new man, if you think in terms of a new man, you know, context is very, very important. And we need to reimagine what does it mean to be a mature masculine in the evolving context of today. If you look at 150 years ago or 100 years ago, most of so-called modern society was very much grounded in the industrial age. So, you know what? People worked very hard in factories, making things, earning a living. Mostly it was men who did that. In many service industries like healthcare and education, women were more than men. Okay. And at home, there was a great clarity of roles. Women were typically the nurturers, and men were typically the providers, protectors. Okay. Fast forward today, we live in a world that is so hyper volatile, ambiguous, uncertain, complex. A world where the social landscape fabric has become a very vast mosaic. And it is very easy, because this passing parade of this complexity it makes it very easy for all of us to be very confused about who we are, until we step out of that habitat and we step into silence in wilderness, and we close our eyes and we connect with our breath, and we continue to be there, whether we are men or women or any other physical manifestation. In that silence, we start connecting with our true essence. And there's no more ambiguity. There's no more confusion and complexity about who am I? What feels native for me? Those who I love, do I have the capacity to feel compassion for them, love for them, understanding for them, patience for them? And also, those who I really care about, do I feel a very fierce sense of protection, caring, provision? Do I feel a sense of vision for where life ought to be for my family and I? All these things settle in clarity. And suddenly, we've transcended context. And the important thing about the pilgrimage is that the clarity that we have, and I mean pilgrimage metaphorically, not so much, physically, like, setting out. People can just undertake that pilgrimage in their home if they can create the right kind of setting for it, or in some other place. That clarity that we receive at a very primordial level, not at an intellectual level. Yeah, well, if that clarity can also go to the intellectual level, beautiful, you can explain it with other people. But once you access that clarity at a cellular level, then the next challenge for us, the next invitation for us, the setup for us is, how do we contextualize it to the kind of complex world we live in? Because, when we return home here, whether it's a workplace, whether it's in our communities, whether it's at home, the context has evolved to such an extent that it becomes very confusing. How do I show up? Is the situation demanding that I show up in my inner feminine? Or is the situation demanding that I show up in my inner masculine? All of that becomes clear. And yes, so summarizing the big point that you just raised, it is, yes, in the Indian tradition, we have a timeless fountain of that wisdom. And it is fundamentally essential for us to fully claim, access that timeless wisdom today, much more than ever before, because of the kind of complexity that we are living in. And we need to contextualize it.
Oh, I don't know if you still see me, Sujit, but I lost the connection with you. It's frozen.